I'd been meaning to take a break from the noise. Work had been eating at me for months, and I needed somewhere quiet, far away from traffic and screens and people. I found this listing on Airbnb for a small cabin in northern Michigan. It looked like what I was searching for: one bedroom, with stove, surrounded by forest, no neighbors for miles. The pictures showed a peaceful place with tall trees, a little deck, and a hammock out back. The host had good reviews and the price was decent. Felt like a steal. I booked it for 5 nights. The drive was long, almost 9 hours. The last 2 hours were just winding back roads with barely any signs. I had to stop twice to make sure I wasn't lost. But eventually, I saw the little carved sign the host had mentioned in her directions. It was just a weathered wooden board with the word Birch Hollow burned into it. The gravel road leading to the cabin was narrow and looked barely used. My tires kicked up dust and twigs as I drove in. No other cars, no mailboxes, just trees and silence. When I arrived, the cabin looked just like the photos, maybe even better. The wood was aged but clean, the windows had these old green shutters, and there was a stack of firewood ready on the porch. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. I remember standing there for a while before unpacking, just breathing and listening. No cars, no dogs, no voices, just wind and birds. I met the host briefly when I got there. She pulled up in an old blue pickup and handed me the key. She seemed nice, probably in her 50s, short gray hair, practical clothes. We didn't talk long. She gave me a quick run-through of how to work the wood stove and where the extra blankets were. Before leaving, she said something that I laughed off at the time. "If you hear knocking," she said, "don't open the door unless you're expecting someone." I thought she was joking and kind of chuckled. She didn't smile. She just looked at me and repeated, "Don't open the door. Not unless you know who it is." Then she left. I didn't think about it much after that. The first day and night were peaceful. I made a fire, cooked pasta, sat on the porch with a beer. I walked a bit on a trail behind the cabin, saw some deer in the trees. I wrote in my notebook for a while, read a book. It was exactly what I needed. No phone signal, no internet, just quiet. I slept early that night, dead tired from the drive. The second day, I stayed mostly inside. It rained in the afternoon, a steady soft rain that made everything smell green and fresh. I napped on the couch, made some coffee, cooked again, read more. By the time it got dark, I was relaxed in a way I hadn't been in months. Then, around midnight, I heard it. 3 knocks, clear and slow. Knock, knock, knock. I was in bed but still awake. I sat up immediately. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a branch or an animal. It was someone knocking on the front door. I froze. I hadn't told anyone I was here. I hadn't even posted about the trip. No one knew where I was except the host, and she lived miles away. I got up slowly, walked to the front window, and looked through the curtain. Nothing. The porch was empty. The forest was black past the deck light. My truck was still parked out front, untouched. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, holding the curtain barely open. Then again, knock, 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 came from the door directly below the window I was behind. I stepped back quickly. My mind was racing. I didn't have a gun, but I grabbed the small knife from the kitchen drawer. I turned off the lights, locked the bedroom door, and waited in the dark. Who the hell would be knocking on a cabin this far out, this late at night? I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing things. Branches snapping, wind in the trees, but it all sounded suspicious now. I didn't hear the knocking again, but I didn't relax either. In the morning, I checked the porch. There were no footprints. The wood was dry except for a few leaves. No note, no sign of anything unusual. It was like nothing had happened, but I knew what I heard. I called the host. I tried to keep my voice calm, but she must have heard something in my tone. "Did someone come by last night?" I asked. "I heard knocking. Late." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He used to live there. He shows up sometimes. He thinks it's still his." That was it. No apology, no explanation. I didn't ask anything else. I just thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking a bit after that. I stood in the kitchen for a while, trying to process what she'd said. He used to live there. He shows up sometimes. That's when I decided to leave. I packed up quickly. I didn't even eat breakfast. Just stuffed everything back into my duffel, threw it in the truck, and made sure every window and door was locked behind me. As I drove down the long gravel road, I kept glancing in the mirrors. The forest felt different now. Not peaceful, watched. I felt like something could step out of the trees at any moment. About a mile down the road, just as I was coming around a curve, I saw someone walking. A man. He was thin, maybe in his 40s or 50s, with sunburned skin and messy shoulder-length hair. No shirt, no shoes, just a pair of dirty jeans. He walked slowly, like his feet hurt. When he saw my truck, he stopped in the middle of the road. I didn't stop. I slowed down a little, enough to not hit him, but I wasn't about to open my window or roll to a full stop. As I passed, he turned and looked at me, and it wasn't just a glance. It was the kind of look people give when they're trying to figure out who you are. Like he knew me, or thought he did. I didn't look back. I just kept driving until I hit the main road, then didn't stop again until I was well out of the woods. That was 2 months ago. I haven't told many people. When I do, they laugh a little and say it was probably just a squatter, maybe a local who got lost. Maybe, but the way the host said it, he used to live there, made it feel like it wasn't the first time, like she knew about him, and she still rented the place out. The knocking wasn't some accident. That man had come back. Maybe he thought it was still his cabin. Maybe he didn't care who was inside, but he came right up to the door at midnight, and he might have done it again the next night. Or worse, I still think about that second knock. How calm and even it was. How he waited between sets, like he expected me to answer. I don't rent remote cabins anymore. No more middle-of-nowhere retreats. I still love the woods. I still love the quiet. But next time I'll stay somewhere with neighbors. Somewhere with locks that haven't been tested by someone who never really left. I booked the cottage on a Tuesday. I had been feeling overwhelmed with work and needed a break. Somewhere quiet where I could just write and clear my head. The listing showed a small, whitewashed farmhouse-style cottage sitting alone in the middle of a field surrounded by woods. It was in rural Pennsylvania, about 4 hours from where I lived. No neighbors in sight, and the pictures made it look peaceful and warm. Brick chimney, old wooden floors, a cozy little desk by a window overlooking the trees. The host mentioned it had once been a farmhouse, built in the early 1900s, but had been updated recently. It seemed perfect for a weekend writing retreat. I arrived just after 4 p.m. on Friday. The drive had been uneventful. Just long, winding back roads, thick woods on both sides, no cell signal for the last 20 minutes. When I pulled up, the sun was already starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. The house looked even smaller in person, almost like a dollhouse. Paint peeling a bit near the edges, but it gave it character. There was a little porch with a swing, and the key was waiting in a lockbox just like the host said. Inside, it smelled like cedar and lemon cleaner. The furniture was a mix of old and new. An antique-looking rocking chair next to a modern couch, a stone fireplace that looked original, and a new-looking rug covering most of the living room floor. The kitchen was small but functional. A stove, fridge, coffee maker. Everything I'd need for the weekend. That first night was exactly what I'd hoped for. I made pasta, poured a glass of wine, and sat at the desk by the window to write. The only sound was the creaking of the old house and the occasional hoot of an owl outside. I felt more relaxed than I had in weeks. I went to bed around 11, bundled under a thick quilt, and slept straight through the night. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and decided to walk the property a bit. There was a worn trail that led into the woods, so I followed it for about 20 minutes before looping back. When I returned, I made eggs and sat at the little kitchen table. That's when I noticed something odd. In the corner of the kitchen, under the small mat by the sink, there was a faint outline in the floorboards. I pulled the mat aside, and sure enough, there was a rectangular door in the floor, like a storm cellar or basement hatch. It had a thick, rusted padlock on it. I hadn't noticed it when I first arrived. It wasn't mentioned in the listing, and I didn't remember seeing it in the pictures. I stood there for a while, just looking at it. It didn't feel threatening, exactly, but something about it made me uneasy. It wasn't just the lock. It was the fact that it had been hidden under the mat. Why would they cover it if it was just storage? I took a photo and messaged the host. Something simple. Hi, just noticed a locked door in the kitchen floor. Wasn't in the listing. Just curious what it's for. A few hours later, I got a reply. Just storage. Please don't tamper with it. That was it. No greeting, no explanation. Short and cold. I didn't respond. I tried to shake it off, but the vibe had shifted for me. The house no longer felt cozy. It felt like I was somewhere I shouldn't be. Still, I tried to focus on writing. I spent the afternoon at the desk, half productive, constantly distracted by thoughts of what could be under that door. By nightfall, I was on edge. I made dinner, barely touched it, and curled up on the couch with a book. Every small sound in the house felt louder now. The creaks in the walls, the tick of the old clock above the fireplace. Even the wind pushing against the windows made me flinch. I checked the padlock again before heading upstairs, just to make sure it was still there. It was. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It was faint at first, dull, rhythmic. I stayed still, not even breathing. The sound came again. A low, muffled thudding, like someone hitting something soft but heavy. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and listened. It was coming from downstairs, from the kitchen. I got out of bed slowly, stepped quietly onto the old wooden floor, and moved to the top of the stairs. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood there, holding the banister, staring into the dark. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. No movement, no creaks. Just silence. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as the moon moved through the trees outside. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps below, but I couldn't be sure. I didn't go down to check. Couldn't. When the sun came up, I finally got out of bed. I walked down the stairs slowly, still half expecting something to jump out at me. But everything looked the same. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window. The smell of the woods drifted in through the cracked screen door. For a moment, it almost felt normal again. Then I looked at the kitchen floor. The mat was pushed aside. The padlock was gone. And the basement door was open. Just an inch. Just enough to see the dark space beneath. I froze. My mind started racing. Had someone been inside the house last night? Had the host come by? No, it didn't make sense. I would have heard footsteps on the porch, heard the lockbox open. I hadn't heard a door open or close. I walked over and slowly pushed the hatch shut. I didn't look down inside. I didn't want to know what was down there. I found a heavy cast iron pan in one of the kitchen drawers and placed it on top of the hatch. It wouldn't stop someone from opening it again, but it made me feel better. Sort of. I packed in 15 minutes. I didn't even make coffee. I just grabbed my bag, threw everything into the trunk of my car, and left. I didn't lock the front door behind me. I didn't care. Once I was back on the main road and had signal again, I looked up the address. I wanted to know more. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I had to. I found an old article from a local paper. The cottage had belonged to a man in the early 90s. He had been arrested after authorities found 3 people locked in his basement. He'd lured them with job ads, promising free housing and work. They had been missing for weeks. The article said one of the victims had escaped through a loose floorboard, flagged down a driver on the road, and the police raided the house the next day. The man was sentenced to 25 years. There were no follow-ups, no recent updates, just that one article. I reported the listing to Airbnb that same day. I didn't mention the basement door opening by itself. I just told them the padlock door hadn't been disclosed and that the host's response was evasive. I mentioned the house's history and sent a screenshot of the article. 3 days later, the listing was gone. No explanation, just disappeared. I don't know if the host knew about the history or if they were hiding something else entirely. I'll never know what was making those sounds or why the padlock was removed. Maybe someone had been down there the whole time. Maybe someone still is. All I know is I will never, ever stay in a place that remote again. And I don't book anything now without reading everything. Every review, every detail, even the address. I was passing through Colorado on a long road trip. I had no fixed plan, just driving wherever I felt like, stopping when I got tired. It was late fall, and the air had that sharp chill that meant winter was right around the corner. I'd been driving all day through winding mountain roads, my legs stiff and my eyes starting to blur from staring at the asphalt for hours. I figured I'd stop for the night, find a cheap place, and get some real rest. I opened Airbnb on my phone while sitting in a gas station parking lot just outside a small town. Most listings were pricey cabins or mountain lodges, but one caught my eye, a room in a large, older house for less than half the price of everything else nearby. The listing said the host lived upstairs, but the entire downstairs floor would be mine. There were a few decent reviews. Nothing fancy, but quiet, clean, and safe. That's all I needed. I booked it. The house was about 10 minutes outside town, surrounded by tall pine trees. No close neighbors, just long driveways and occasional mailboxes sticking out of the forest. When I pulled up, the place looked old but well-maintained. Big two-story structure with faded green shutters, wooden siding, and a long porch out front. It gave off that typical mountain home vibe. Nothing weird or creepy, just old. The host didn't come out to greet me. She messaged me the code to a lockbox on the front door. I let myself in. The inside smelled like wood and lemon cleaner, not unpleasant. The downstairs was cozy, dim lighting, old but comfortable furniture, shaggy carpets. The kitchen was small but stocked, and the living room had a big worn-out couch and a stone fireplace. I dropped my bag in the guest room and walked around a bit. There were 2 bedrooms downstairs, one of which was clearly the guest room for visitors like me. The other was locked. It was the only door in the hallway that didn't open. Heavy wood, dark stain, a rounded brass handle. It stood out almost like it belonged to a different house. The door didn't have a label or anything, just a small keyhole and a scuffed bottom edge like it had been used a lot. I tried the handle once, locked. Figured it was nothing. Still, something about that door stuck in my head. The first night was normal. I made a frozen dinner, watched something forgettable on my laptop, and went to bed early. The walls were thick, so I didn't hear anything from upstairs. It was dead quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring a little. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. No reason, no dream I could remember. Just opened my eyes in the dark. That's when I heard it. A soft dragging sound. Slow, like something heavy being pulled across a rug. I froze in bed and held my breath. The sound stopped, then silence again. I stared into the dark until I finally fell back asleep. The next morning, I figured it was probably nothing. Old house settling. Maybe the host moved something upstairs. But it had sounded close, like it was on my floor. That evening, after I got back from exploring the area, I noticed the locked door again. I messaged the host, casually asking what was inside. She responded after a few minutes. Just storage. Don't worry. That was it. I tried to put it out of my mind. Ate dinner, watched a movie, checked the locks, went to bed. Same thing again. Middle of the night, I woke up without warning. This time it was faint but definitely there. The dragging sound, like something brushing across the floor. Then a pause. Then 2 faint thuds, like a soft knock on wood. I didn't move. My room was across the hall from the locked door, and I suddenly had the thought, what if the sound was coming from there? I waited. Nothing else. After a while, I drifted off again. Third night, I was tense before I even went to bed. Couldn't relax. I kept glancing at the hallway, thinking about that door. Something about it just felt wrong now, like I wasn't supposed to be near it. Couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I sat in the hallway on the carpet, back against the wall, facing the locked door. I didn't even know why. Maybe just trying to prove to myself that it was nothing. Then I got an idea. I grabbed a ceramic coffee cup from the kitchen and sat back down. I placed the cup against the door, tilted my head, and pressed my ear to the bottom. For a while, I didn't hear anything. My own breathing sounded too loud in the cup. I almost pulled away. Then I heard it. Breathing. Soft, steady, rhythmic, like someone sleeping, right behind the door. I dropped the cup and stood up. My heart was pounding in my chest. I backed away slowly, staring at the doorknob. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. There was no dog, no mention of a guest, and it wasn't the kind of house where someone would just stay in storage. I packed my bag, grabbed my stuff in a rush, trying not to look at the door as I moved around the hallway. Every creak of the floor made my skin crawl. I didn't turn off the lights, just walked out the front door, got in my car, and drove half a mile down the road to a turnout in the trees. I locked the doors and slept in the back seat, curled up and tense, checking the mirrors every half hour. The next morning, I drove back just to return the key to the lockbox and check out properly. I didn't go inside. I didn't want to. The front door was shut tight. The house looked exactly the same as when I arrived. Peaceful, quiet, normal. I left a neutral review. Didn't mention anything specific. Just said the place wasn't quite for me. But when I got home a few days later, I filed a safety complaint through Airbnb. I didn't accuse the host of anything directly. I didn't know what to say, really. I just described the locked door, the noises, and how something didn't feel right. I didn't expect anything to come of it. Maybe someone would check in, maybe not. About a month later, I got a message from Airbnb. They said the host had been removed from the platform following an investigation. They didn't give any details, just that the listing was no longer active. That was it. I've thought about it a lot since then, tried to come up with explanations. Maybe the host had a relative staying there without telling anyone. Maybe someone was living there secretly. Maybe it was a tenant situation and she was skirting Airbnb rules. But the way she described it, just storage, didn't match anything. And that breathing, I still remember the sound of it. So calm, like someone used to being in the dark, waiting, breathing through the door like they knew someone was listening. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs since then, but now I always check every door, every room. I don't stay anywhere with locked doors anymore, ever. My girlfriend and I rented a loft in New Orleans for a 5-day trip. It was one of those places that looked too stylish to be comfortable. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings, tall windows, weird furniture. The pictures had shown this one room completely filled with antique mirrors. Like every wall was covered in them, floor to ceiling. Some of them were old and cloudy, others were perfectly clean, different shapes and sizes. There must have been at least 30 of them in there. Oval ones, square ones, tall standing ones, all kinds. It was the kind of thing that looks artistic in a photo but gives you an uneasy feeling when you're actually standing in the middle of it. The host called it the art piece room and said we shouldn't move or touch anything inside. There was a little plaque on the door, too, that said the same thing. No touching, no rearranging. We just assumed it was some kind of installation by a local artist or something. A lot of places in New Orleans have that offbeat, quirky style, so we didn't think too much of it at first. We joked that it felt like walking into a haunted funhouse, but we laughed it off. The first 2 nights were normal. We went out during the day, walked around the quarter, tried the food, listened to music, did all the tourist stuff. But on the 3rd morning, I noticed something weird when I went to get a glass of water. One of the mirrors had fogged up. It was faint, but you could clearly see that someone had breathed on it. Just a small oval of condensation in the center, like someone had stood right in front of it and exhaled. I figured maybe it was a draft or the humidity or something. It's New Orleans. It's always humid. I wiped it down and didn't say anything to my girlfriend. But the next morning, we both saw it. 2 mirrors fogged this time, one of them with writing on it. You had to stand at the right angle to see it, but it said, in thin, smeared letters, "Don't look behind." The words had started to fade by the time we really noticed them, but they were definitely there. We stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out how it could have happened. We hadn't touched the mirrors. The windows were closed. No one else had the code to the door. We checked the door lock history through the smart lock app. It only showed our entries. No one else had been inside. That day, we put little pieces of tape on all the doors and windows. just small ones at the edge so we'd know if they were opened. We didn't mention it to the host because, honestly, we didn't know what we'd even say. Hey, one of your decorative mirrors is breathing at night. Didn't feel like a complaint that would make sense. The fourth morning was worse. There were at least 4 fogged spots, one on each wall, like someone had walked around the room, breathing on different mirrors. And one of them had another message. He's still here. This one was bigger, almost stretched across the entire mirror. The letters were crooked, like they'd been written by someone using their finger in a hurry. We checked the whole place again. The doors, windows, every single piece of tape was untouched. We even pulled the tall mirror in the corner forward a bit to see if there was anything hidden behind it. There wasn't, just drywall and dust. We moved the smaller ones too, carefully, one at a time, even though the host said not to. All we found behind them were spider webs and cracked plaster. There was no crawl space, no holes in the wall, nothing. That night, I set up my phone in the hallway facing the mirror room. I put it on a little tripod and turned on the video recording, made sure it was fully charged. It was one of those nights where you don't sleep well. Every creak, every pop from the old building kept snapping me awake. I kept checking the time, flipping over, listening. My girlfriend slept through most of it. In the morning, I checked the phone. The video ran fine for the first few hours. Nothing happened. Just an empty hallway, the closed door to the mirror room. But then, around 3:12 a.m., the bedroom door, our door, slowly opened. It didn't swing or blow open. It opened like someone turned the knob and pushed it slowly. Then the camera glitched. The screen froze for a second, then went to complete static. Not black, not just turned off. Full static like an old TV without signal. That lasted for over 2 hours. Then the recording just ended on its own, even though the battery wasn't dead. When I tried to replay it again, the entire file was corrupted. Wouldn't load. That was the final straw for me. We packed everything and left by noon. We didn't even stay for the last night we'd paid for. We didn't tell the host why. We just said there was a family emergency and we had to cut the trip short. Back home, I tried to retrieve the video from cloud backup. I'd set it to upload everything automatically, but that clip wasn't there. Everything else had uploaded except that night's footage. Just gone. The other clips, the ones from earlier in the week, were still there. But the one that mattered was missing. No trace of it. A few weeks later, I went back to check the listing. It had been completely removed from the site. No unavailable message, no archived page. Just gone. Even the host's profile had disappeared. I tried searching for the address, tried finding it on a map, but the location pin we had used didn't even show the loft anymore. It was like it never existed. I still think about that mirror room, about how many reflections were in there. When you stood in the center, you could see yourself from every angle, but also little bits of the room that didn't line up. Slight delays in movement, corners of the mirrors that caught something that wasn't there in real life. Maybe we were just sleep-deprived, jumpy, overthinking things, but we both saw the messages. We both saw the fog. We both saw the video until it went to static. I never figured out who was behind it or how. There's no logical way someone got in and out without touching the tape or leaving signs. I thought maybe it was some kind of twisted prank by the host. Maybe they were filming us, watching us. But we checked for cameras and found nothing. And why go through all that trouble just to freak someone out? Sometimes I wonder if that place was being used for something else, before it was an Airbnb. Something that left traces behind. Not ghosts or spirits, just remnants. Things people don't clean up properly. Rooms like that don't get designed by accident. That many mirrors, that kind of secrecy, that level of silence, it felt wrong. It felt like something used to happen in there. Something that wasn't meant to be seen. We never filed a report. Never told Airbnb. We just wanted to forget it. But I still have dreams about those mirrors. Not nightmares exactly, just flashes of standing in that room, surrounded by versions of myself, and something behind me that never showed up in the real reflection. I needed a break from the noise. Work had been getting to me and I couldn't focus on anything anymore. Not at home, not at the office, not even in coffee shops. So I booked a few nights in rural Texas, a place I found on Airbnb. The listing described it as off-grid, but it still had solar panels, internet, running water, and even air conditioning. The photos showed a small, clean cabin with wide open fields around it and a thick tree line off in the distance. It looked like exactly what I needed: quiet, simple, peaceful. There was one weird line in the listing. It said, "Please turn off all lights after 9 p.m. It's a requirement." It didn't explain why. At first I thought maybe it was just some eco thing because it ran on solar power. I didn't think much of it. The drive was long. I turned off the highway and followed a narrow 2-lane road that eventually turned into gravel. The landscape got more empty the farther I went. Miles of nothing, the occasional rundown barn or rusted fence. Cell service dropped out about 20 minutes before I reached the cabin. It sat alone at the end of a dirt driveway, tucked into a slight dip in the land. No neighbors, no road noise, just stillness. The host wasn't there. She'd left the key in a little lockbox by the front door. Inside, the cabin was exactly like the pictures, clean, minimal, but cozy. A single bed, a small table, a chair, kitchenette, and a shelf with a few books. No TV. One window in the main room, another smaller one in the bedroom. The back door opened to a tiny porch with a view of the open field. It was hot when I arrived, but the AC worked well. I unpacked, ate a quick meal, and sat outside with a book. The only sounds were the wind and the bugs. Felt like I could finally breathe again. When the sun started to go down, I went inside, made some tea, and kept reading. I turned on a small lamp by the bed. I completely forgot about the 9 p.m. light rule until my phone buzzed at 9:15. I'd left it on airplane mode earlier but had reconnected to the Wi-Fi. The message was short. "Please turn it off now. For your safety." No hello or sorry to bother. Just that. I stared at the message for a moment. The wording was strange. For your safety? Still, I turned the lamp off. I brushed my teeth, got into bed, and lay there in the dark. I kept thinking about that message. For your safety, played over and over in my head. Eventually, I drifted off. I woke up again around 2:30 a.m. I don't know what stirred me, but I was instantly alert. It was pitch black. No moon. No light at all. Couldn't see a thing. I lay there trying to figure out what had woken me. Then I heard it. A faint sound from outside, like someone stepping on dry grass. Then a pause. Then another. Slow. Measured. It wasn't an animal. I've camped enough to know how deer or coyotes move. This was deliberate. I held my breath. The sound circled around the cabin slowly. I could hear the crunch of grass and dirt. Then it stopped. For a while, there was nothing. Then came the tapping. Soft, delicate, just once or twice, against the bedroom window. It was so quiet I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But then it came again, a little louder, not knocking, tapping, like the tip of a fingernail. I didn't move. I was lying on my side, facing the opposite wall. The curtain was still open, I realized. I'd forgotten to draw it shut. I felt sick realizing that whoever or whatever was out there could see straight in, and I had no idea what they were looking at. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, for what felt like an hour. At some point, the tapping stopped. I waited and waited, heart pounding, before I finally fell asleep again. I don't remember when. It must have been just from exhaustion. I woke up with the sun already high. Everything inside looked normal, quiet, still. The light made the fear from the night before feel distant. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the wind had blown something against the window. I almost convinced myself that it had just been a bad dream. But then I went outside. The ground around the cabin was mostly dirt and patchy grass. Not a lot of growth. I noticed the prints immediately. Bare feet, dozens of them, different sizes. Some small, some wide. They weren't animal tracks. They were human, and they weren't mine. They circled the entire cabin. Some were deep, others barely visible. They overlapped in some places. One set stopped directly in front of the bedroom window. The same window I had been too afraid to look through. I walked the perimeter of the cabin slowly. My mouth was dry. My hands were cold despite the heat. I kept scanning the horizon, the tree line, the long dirt road I had driven in on. There was no one, no movement. I didn't see any camera on the property, but the host somehow knew I had left the light on. Maybe she lived nearby. Maybe she could see the cabin from some angle. I thought about the message again. Please turn it off now, for your safety. I didn't stay another night. I packed everything, double-checked the windows and door, and left around noon. I didn't even bother cleaning up or leaving a note. I just wanted to be gone. As I drove out, my phone reconnected to the network. I stopped a few miles up the road to send a message to the host. I asked if she had seen anyone near the cabin last night, if she had cameras, if she knew about the footprints. She replied after a few minutes. Just one line. They only come when they see lights. That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, nothing else. I didn't reply. That night, back in a motel near the highway, I couldn't sleep. Every time a car passed outside or the AC rattled, I jumped. I kept the lights off just in case. And the next night, too. And the one after that. Even now, weeks later, I still check my windows before bed. I keep the curtains shut. I never sleep with a light on, not even a night light. And I haven't booked another remote Airbnb since, because I don't know who or what was out there that night. I just know they were barefoot. There were several of them, and they came when they saw the light.